Ladies and gentlemen, let's Gaming Tentacom video. We're going to be checking out the best graphics cards for June 2014. So, to be honest with you, there's not been a huge amount of movement in the market. There has, of course, been the release of Nvidia's new Titan Z. But for most gamers, I'm sure you'll agree, $3,000 for such a card is most likely not worth it, despite the fact that it does feature two GK 110 GPUs, but they're running at a lower clock speed anyway. They're running at a standard clock of 705 and boosts up to 876, which is considerably slower than, say, the Titan Black. So what we're going to be doing is going through various price points and giving you my opinions. I've also done this as an article because, quite frankly, there's a lot of cards here, and, well, it's just easier to also link it in the description so you guys could check it out, figure out what your budget. I've also linked a couple of reviews inside that we've done on relevant cards, and also given you a couple of links so that you can just click on it and check out the cards directly, as well as pictures and all the other bits and bobs. So anyway, we're going to start. By the way, I'm going to say like $99. So, for example, that would be up to about $100 but I've just said up to 99 so that there's no misconception. So if I say, for example, $200, it's not like 250, it'll be bang on or under 200. So anyway, with that said, so you've got $99 to play with. Well, $99, you can't really beat the Amd Radeon R9 250X 1GB. Make certain that you get the GDDR5 variant. Now that's linked in the article, and we've actually done a review of the R9 250. That performed really well. We did, of course, review the GDDR5 version. Now there is DDR3, but you'd be pretty silly to go for it. If this is the amount of cash that you've got, 1080p can certainly be within your grasp. It's just not going to be 1080p with all of the high resolution trimmings. However, it can have some benefits. For example, if you're creating a streaming system with, say, Steam in mind, then it could certainly be worth it. Certainly games such as Dark Souls 2 and Battlefield should run on it. You will have to sacrifice some of the settings slightly, but considering the specs, this is a really good card, and it's considerably cheaper than the alternatives. It's around $50 cheaper than our next step up, which we'll go into in just a moment. And on top of that, it's a lot better than anything Nvidia can manage to muster at this particular price point. Speaking of which, $150. What options do you have? Well, you've got two. AMD and Nvidia are both competitive at this price point. You've got the R9 265, that's 2GB, GDDR5, all of these cards are GDDR5, although that's pretty obvious. And then also the GTX 750 Ti, that's 2GB. Obviously the later is from Nvidia. So why have we got two cards? Well, neither is actually better than the other technically. Well, that's actually not 100% true, but we'll go into why in just a moment. The R9, the 265, is slightly faster. In most games, it's going to be between 10 to 20%. Now, I know what you're going to say. Well, that's a bit of a dumb statement then. Why not just go for the Radeon? Well, you're going to be paying for that because it's also a little bit hotter to run, and it also requires a spare power connection. Plus, some folks just plain prefer Nvidia, some folks just plain prefer AMD. There are other benefits as well, such as, for example, G-Sync with Nvidia, and of course everyone knows about hardware physics. But let's just be totally and utterly realistic here. With this level of performance in the cards, it's not really going to be much of a big deal. 2GB of RAM is definitely a slight edge for AMD because, well, you do have Mantle, which can be slightly more memory efficient, although I do emphasize slightly. My personal opinion, it really depends on your perspective, on what your needs are. If you need raw performance, then AMD. If you don't mind sacrificing a little bit of performance, Nvidia. Both cards overclock pretty well also. So, just something to bear in mind. Okay. So you've got a little bit more cash. You've managed to break the piggy bank open. You've got $199-ish. What'd you go for? Well, really and honestly, AMD are once again, your man. You've got the R9 270X, once again, with 2 GB of memory. There's no real point in going for a card with more at this particular price budget range, and once again, this is a really good buy. Now, let's just be honest. This is basically to the point where you can run pretty much everything at 1080p with max settings. Not necessarily the highest levels of anti-aliasing. You might have to sacrifice your setting here and there, but pretty much everything will be running at the highest generally. It is behind the Nvidia GeForce GTX 760 in terms of raw performance, but you're paying more for it. I've discussed more about that in the article. But with this, you're basically getting a full AMD Radeon Pecan, and it's pretty good. It's considerably faster than, say, the GTX 660. It's almost to the 760 range, and it's got enough memory to play pretty much whatever you'd want. Now, Nvidia are pretty much taking over at this particular price budget at $299. This absolutely decimates 1080p. It makes it its bitch, I believe is the correct term, and that would be the GTX 770. 2 GB, so these cards overclock really well. Now, I was tempted to recommend AMD because it's pretty much within the same type of price bracket, but Nvidia's, in my opinion, offers slightly better performance. It is ever so slightly more expensive, but you get better performance for it, and honestly, I think that even Nvidia's reference design is pretty damn awesome. Now, the only downside is you only get 2 GB. So, for example, with AMD's Radeon R9 280X, you do get 3 gigs, which is definitely an advantage, but I'd question at this level just how much a memory advantage is going to make a difference, to be honest. Maybe at the next level, which we'll discuss in just a moment. Now, as I said, it's a toss-up. I don't think particularly one card is better than the other, but personally I would go with Nvidia in this particular case because I think the price performance ever so slightly takes it. And I do mean ever so slightly. Once again, both with their pros and cons are mentioned in the article. So, you've got a little bit more cash. You've got $399. What do you get? Well, now AMD are the ones that basically run past Nvidia. You get the R9 290. So don't forget, this comes with 4 GB of GDDR5 memory, and it's pretty much to the point where no one would really argue about this decision. There's enough GPU grunt here to make 1080p not even an issue unless you're going to be playing on something that's not optimized at all, like, say, Watch Dogs. And even then, when it's patched, you're not going to have too much of a concern. This is the type of card, however, that does put out quite a bit of heat, but as long as you've got a reasonable case with reasonable cooling, you're not particularly going to have too much of a problem. However, now we're getting into the big boy territory. Now you're getting into the GTX 780 range. Now, it's not massively more powerful than the R9, but it is considerably more overclockable. Generally, obviously, overclocking equals your mileage may vary. This is not a full GK110 unit. One of the SMXs is disabled here, but as I said, it is pretty damn overclockable anyway, so you could reach almost GTX 780 Ti levels. It does come with 3 GB cards, 3 GB of memory, and will pretty much massacre anything at this point. Now, if you've got more cash to spend, you could go ahead and get AMD's Radeon R9 290X. That's 4 GB, so you do get an additional gig of RAM. But I don't personally recommend it. The reason is because it's considerably more expensive. And at that point, you're pretty much going to be verging on the 780 Ti territory. And in my opinion, that's the better card than the R9 290X. My personal opinion. I'm not saying for you, but for me personally. Next up, you've got 599. What'd you get? Well, the GTX 780 Ti, my good friend. Now, we've done a full review of this, which is linked in the article, but I honestly absolutely adore this card. It will tear through anything. This is one of those cards where once you've gone and used it, pretty much anything that's lower end, you can just tell. This pretty much tears through anything. This will be the game. This will allow you to play Crisis at 60 frames a second. This will be the card that allows you to downscale from, say, 1440p or even higher resolutions. It's pretty awesome. The only slight problem with this card is it's only got 3 GB of memory. I personally feel Nvidia made a bit of a mistake here, so I don't necessarily feel it's the best for crossfire or SLI situations. I feel that AMD is slightly better in those regards if you're going for super high resolutions, because obviously the frame buffer size can become a bit of an issue. But certainly if you're just going with a single card and you're targeting like a 1440p monitor, just for example, then the 780 Ti is pretty much your best bet in my personal opinion. Next, dual GPU range. This is $1,500 US. Now there's multiple options on this, but I settled on the AMD Radeon R9 295X2. That's 8 GB of GDDR5 memory. That's 4 GB per GPU. Now this is liquid cooled. Now there were a couple of other options. You could have gone for the R9 290. Now that actually is a really good option if you don't have quite that amount of money. And if you do go for the R9 290, it certainly is very advisable later on to go for Crossfire. In this situation, however, you could have also gone for the R9 290X. But the reason I didn't go with that and instead opting for the R9 295X2 is because, well, it's going to be quieter because this is liquid cooling. Some folks can be put off by that. I don't particularly feel that this is a major big deal, and my personal opinion is it's a really good card for the cash. It's going to cost you about $1,500, which is half what Nvidia are charging for their particular card. And when you consider that both are performing pretty much, interchangeably, arguably from some of the benchmarks, AMD slightly take it. Obviously, in certain games, Nvidia slightly take it. It doesn't really make a difference, though, to be honest, in this particular instance. Both cards are pretty damn, at this point, pretty much damn interchangeable, but it's just the price point. Even if Nvidia's cards was like 20% more, 20% faster, there's just no reason to go for it over the 295X2 unless you've got specific uses for double precision. If you're not just buying it for gaming, by all means consider Nvidia, but if it is just gaming, I don't see a reason not to go with AMD. It's also worth remembering that you can crossfire these, so potentially you could actually have equivalent of 4 of these, GPUs in your system, which is just ludicrous. That will basically eat 4K alive. I mean, to be honest, just one of these R9 295X2s would eat 4K alive anyway. But if you do so wish to be ridiculous, for the same amount of money as the Titan Z, you could go ahead and you could buy, well, 2 of these. So yeah. There are other options as well, such as 2 780 Tis. I just don't particularly feel that it's the best option. Personally, for dual GPU, I kind of only feel there's one option at the moment. Obviously, it will change pretty soon, but for now, I think that's about it for this particular video. So, hopefully you've enjoyed it. As I said, all of the relevant links are in the articles. If you do have any questions or whatever, you can go ahead and shoot me a message on Facebook. That would be facebook.com/RedGamingTech, or you can tweet me specifically at RGT Crimson Rain. That would be RAYNE, and you shall find me, and then you can stalk me. Not literally, but you can, ask me if you've got any further questions. I think that's just about it for this particular video. Hopefully you found it somewhat informative. I'll see you soon. Take care, and bye for now.